We weren't given much information about Firewatch initially, and certainly one of the reasons I was so intrigued about it was the mystery of what it even entailed. Given that it is a very narratively focused game, it makes sense for Campo Santo not to reveal anything about the very tightly knit story. It's not a walking simulator, at least not according to my own definition, in the sense that there are dialogue options much like in The Wolf Among Us or other games of that nature. The first few minutes of the game are expositional. You're introduced to Henry and his rather sad backstory, but you already get to make some choices about how things play out. For the most part, this is done via text, which, considering the rest of the game is fully voice acted, struck me as odd at first. However, precisely because that first section is pretty depressing, and the game itself from that point on is your escapist adventure as a lookout, to my mind it actually made sense to take the emotion out of that beginning section just a little by having it explained through text. The rest of the game is set in the Wyoming wilderness, where you don't have any human contact aside from your boss, a woman named Delilah. Your time with the game is divided into days, and you will find that there can be huge gaps in between those days, which makes sense considering the game actually takes place during the time frame of an entire summer. But it also means that the game only shows you the most important snippets of character development between Delilah and Henry. To me, this made the game feel a little jarring as I played it, but the writing is actually so incredibly well done that the characters are well fleshed out nonetheless. The writing really is downright incredible. It's witty, it's very funny when it wants to be.
I bless the rains down in Africa!
But also dramatic enough to convey that something terrible is going on at the appropriate times. Most importantly, the characters are believable. They actually feel like human beings, and their reactions always seem genuine and relatable. In a strange way, the dynamic between the two protagonists reminded me a lot of Booker and Elizabeth from BioShock Infinite. You both have your own backstories that you're not necessarily eager to reveal to each other at first. Your partnership is formed out of necessity and trust is earned over time. I'm not saying the relationship between Henry and Delilah felt like it was merely emulated or that I felt less interested in them because I was reminded of BioShock Infinite. In fact, if anything, I enjoyed it in much the same way that I liked the relationship between Booker and Elizabeth, despite the fact that Delilah is just a disembodied voice on your radio. The pacing of the storytelling as well was just right, I feel. You can invest some extra time to find areas on the map that you might otherwise miss and learn about them. You're even given express opportunity to do so, but for the most part you follow a narrative path. There are rarely instances where there's too big a gap between interesting events, and this way the game kept me hooked the entire time through. I feel like the weakest part of the narrative is the ending. The story feels like it's built to lead up to some big reveal that, frankly, doesn't ever come. You uncover what's going on, and the tension during the game definitely keeps you interested in things as you unravel them, yet the game ends tapering off, which left me somewhat unsatisfied. I also feel I should point out that the story is going to play out essentially the same each time you play through the game, and the main kick I got out of it was theorizing what exactly was going on, and then bouncing those ideas off of Delilah. For that reason, I see very little incentive to replay the game once you beat it. The dialogue options at the very beginning only bend to your will to a certain degree. I think this is done to underline that you don't play an avatar you can just mold to be like you. Later on, you can make decisions and choose to take the conversation a certain direction, but Henry has his own backstory and he will act a certain way no matter what you do. The choices you make also don't seem to affect the outcome of the story in any grand way. There are little persistent bits that follow you through the game. At one point you get to name a fire, for instance, but they never have any real impact on the path of the story. Something that annoyed me about the way you respond to calls, actually, is you can't do it while holding the map for some reason. As a result, I missed some opportunities to respond to Delilah, which I found particularly frustrating. The other part of the mechanics involves walking around and exploring. This is something the story forces you to do anyway, but there are areas of the map you can miss if you don't explore on your own. I think I should mention here that I'm not usually terrible at navigation, but I felt like I got turned around quite a bit in this game. It's not always made obvious to you where exactly you need to go to complete the current objective. The game also allows you to take different routes to your destination, and you will have a slightly different experience as a result. However, I wouldn't call it an open world, considering you only gain access to some of these areas later in the game. I personally really took to the game's aesthetic. Many narratively focused games like The Vanishing of Ethan Carter, for instance, try to be beautiful but also add some sense of realism. Firewatch opted to go for very saturated colors, and the game almost looks like an impressionist painting as a result. I actually stopped several times just to take in the scenery. As the story unfolds and the situation starts to become more dire, ongoing forest fires make the environment start to look far less hospitable as well, which I thought was a very nice atmospheric touch. As great as the visuals are, the voice acting is actually even more impressive, and combined with the excellent writing, the exchanges between the characters are where the game truly shines.
Ooh, Hawk's Rest.
Yeah. Okay, I see what you're doing.
What do you mean? I just like to stay out of haunted places myself.
The music in this game is not played constantly, but instead is used to accent certain situations, and it works rather well. But I think the music's actually so good that they could have easily used it more. I sadly can't say that the Unity engine this game is built in has been used to its fullest potential. There are instances of missing or floating textures, terrain that allows you to glitch into places you aren't supposed to, and on my relatively powerful system, I experienced quite a few frame rate dips. One additional complaint I have is that, as of the making of this video, there's no easy way to change the field of view. Even though people had already noticed it was slightly low in the trailer and specifically inquired about it, Campo Santo did not include the option to change this on release. When last I checked, they said they were working on it, but technically it should have been there on launch. I'm not going to factor this into my overall opinion of the game too much, because I have the feeling that these issues can be fixed with smaller patches, and they didn't overly take away from my personal enjoyment. It's not a perfect game, but it's a very promising first attempt from a new studio. For $20 you get around 4.5 hours of game time roughly, assuming you explore a bit, which I think is not an unfair value proposition if you enjoy short, captivating, story-heavy experiences, but it really depends on your own position. I really took to the tension and the mystery the game offered, and the excellent presentation and voice acting helped to keep me in it for the entire thing. I fully recommend Firewatch to anyone who has a knack for games like this, and especially if you see it on sale, I'd say you should give it a shot. Thanks for watching, ladies and gentlemen. I'll see you later.